Welcome to Viewpoints. Today, we welcome Tracy Eldridge to this show. Tracy began her career 26 years ago as a dispatcher in Massachusetts. While continuing to dispatch, she branched out into other areas of public safety, like many of us do, EMS, firefighting. Eventually, she moved into commercial partnership. Back in the long day ago, Tracy, I'm sure you remember this. We used to call it, oh, you went into the dark side. Now, yeah, now we're much kinder and gentler. We call it commercial partnership. Then eventually she branched out into her own business and training and consulting. Tracy has some very valuable life lessons she's going to share with us today on leadership and investing in self. Welcome to the show, Tracy. I'm so happy you could join us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
When I was looking over all of the things you have done and your accomplishments, I was smiling because I know there are so many that are not listed on your resume and just, your website. And I'm kind of curious, while you're juggling all of those things, somewhere in there, you're raising children, having a family. Did you ever have time for yourself?
Wow. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Sometimes, I put it this way. I am the carpenter whose house isn't finished. So I know the importance of making time for yourself. I know the things that I need to do to make time for myself. I preach and teach people how to make time for themselves. But there are times that I do not practice what I preach and I get too busy. But we'll actually get into and my thought process is we are going to talk about why I keep myself intentionally busy a lot. So yeah, that was an interesting question. I wasn't expecting that.
I'm sorry. I've always kind of wondered about that, with busy people. How do you, we talk about investing in ourselves professionally, but how do you invest in yourself personally? Because, keeping yourself healthy personally, if you don't do that, then your career self isn't going to be very good either, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been talking a lot about recently, and it kind of ties into what we're going to be talking about today, is I am a late in life diagnosed with ADHD. And so I should have been diagnosed as a child, but a lot of times women are not, or girls are not diagnosed because their kind of hyperactivity looks different than in little boys. And our hyperactivity is actually in our brain. So it's not always an outward sign of that hyperactivity. We're usually labeled as chatty and, may interrupt folks. And yeah, they're a little on the hyper side, but the hyperactivity piece for me that is really prominent is, the 37 tabs that are open in my brain and can't figure out where the music's coming from or what I'm supposed to be working on in that moment. And what I've also noticed is sometimes my brain doesn't shut off. So, there are folks that are busy for different reasons. I know that there's two very specific reasons why I'm always busy. And one is that because of the ADHD brain, but also it's a trauma response from for somebody with PTSD, which I also have, because when you stop, sometimes your brain starts thinking about things that you don't want to be thinking about. So it's almost like you fill it in with all kinds of other things. So I have to really force myself to take a break. Like tonight, I'm actually going out with a friend to a comedy show, and 37 times I almost said, I got so much going on. I really can't, but I'm forcing myself to not bail on that commitment and go and enjoy myself. And I know it'll be worth it all. So
good. Sure. Good for you. Do you have people tell you that, when you take the time out for yourself, they're like, good for you, Tracy. Do people say that to you?
Yeah. Yeah, my husband is my biggest cheerleader, and he's the one that kind of reels me in every once in a while. So I have two beautiful daughters, and they're very successful, and I'm super proud of them. And my husband's beyond proud of all the things that I do, but he's my biggest cheerleader, and it's almost like when I do something like that, he's like, "I'm glad you did that," and sometimes he'll do it for me. So the last couple of weeks, I've been super busy. I've had a lot of really great projects going on in my work with On Scene First, my company, and I've been straight out busy and traveling and handling an ailing mom, and my daughter's having a baby, and so there's just so much going on. And so he planned a night this last weekend to have some of our friends over because he knew I just wouldn't do it because I had too much on my plate, and so if I'm not doing it,
Well,
he will. So
that's
we got
good.
to get one of
That's
those.
good. How
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
important do you feel it is to invest in yourself, on your journey?
So when I started as a baby dispatcher in like 96. And right out of the gate, I learned the importance of learning everything I could about the job that I was doing. Because way back then, I mean, I know you have a history in the center too. And I mean, go back to 1996, how much training did we really have, right? It was there's the radio when it talks, talk back. When the phone rings, answer it. And here you go. And so I had put a lot right out of the gate into really learning everything that I could about the job, the profession, the importance of doing things the right way, how to make things easier. And in true ADHD fashion, our brains work in two speeds. It's either all or nothing. There's very, very rarely is there an in between. And so what I noticed in school and growing up, if it was history or math, there wasn't a lot of effort because it did not intrigue me. It did not keep my attention. But when I moved into public safety, that was the all for me. Everything I did it to the best of my ability. And then as I moved on and my chief dispatcher left, I knew that the next progression for me was to move into that leadership role. And I will tell you one of the things that I did make a mistake on as a leader was I spent a lot of time bettering myself because I had the opportunities to do that, right? So I could go to a leadership seminar, I could take a leadership training class because that was part of my responsibility. But one of the things that I failed at, which if there's a leader listening, I want them to hear me very clearly, is I didn't always give my people the opportunity to level up their leadership skills. And it wasn't intentional. It was more an error of ignorance, not intention. Right. So I didn't say, well, I'm gonna make myself better, but I'm not gonna make you better. It was more I just thought those were the things that I was supposed to do. And if I could go back, I would have encouraged my folks to take leadership classes and to better themselves in that aspect too, because I could have used that help. I just thought that I was the one that was supposed to
Right.
be doing that. So then as I moved on to when I left my 911 center because of PTSD and mental health issues, I went to work for Rapid SOS. And when I first walked into the door at Rapid SOS, I remember it like it was yesterday. Here I am, a country mouse, getting on the train, going into the New York City, into an office of a very young in age startup technology company. And I was like, what have I done? I don't belong here. Like I am middle aged. I have a family. I've been in public safety the majority of my adult life, and I don't feel like I belong here. And I always joke that I felt like I was Penny on The Big Bang Theory. Like I come in with this bubbly, talkative, high energy personality, and the majority of the folks there were quiet and more reserved and task driven. and I was very extroverted and people driven. So it was like this clash of two worlds, and it was just such an amazing opportunity for me to learn how to really understand others in that aspect, but it also allowed me to learn about myself. So as I was there, I started learning for myself that there were just things that I was doing to myself. Like I always joke that I felt like my entire life I was a circle that was trying to be forced into a square hole, right? And in fact, I know now I wasn't actually a circle, I wasn't a square, I was star shaped. And I was never actually going to fit into any of the traditional boxes. So again, continued to build on myself, learn about myself, and then in late 2020 I made that migration. As I was making the migration from the work that I was doing at Rapid SOS to wanting to start my own company, I was sabotaging myself. Like I was doubting myself. I was doubting my abilities to be able to handle the things that I would need to handle to have, this different type of work. But then I started putting in the work on myself. I started training with a coach, like a human behavior coach, because I learned in my processes that one of the biggest challenges for me, and I know this is going to sound, kind of shocking, but one of my biggest challenges is people, and the people that don't understand me. And so I kept having these conversations with myself in my head, like, why am I struggling with these certain kind of groups of people? And it wasn't until I started working with my coach that we started learning about the DISC human behavior model, which basically identifies, if you don't know what DISC is, it identifies folks into 4 very unique categories. And so when I made reference to people driven versus task driven folks and reserved versus outgoing folks, basically DISC puts us in those kind of 4 categories. So your primary letter, if you will, is if you're a D style, you are an extroverted task person. If you're an I style, which is what I am, you're an extroverted people person or outgoing people person. And then if you're an S, which is my very second quality, like very close second, you're a reserved people person. And then if you are a C style, you are a reserved task person. So you're either outgoing or reserved, task or people driven. And some folks are both, right? Like, so you could be kind of in the middle of each. You could have more than one letter. And it wasn't until I really started working with Gord that I understood that there were things in my personality that could be conflicting with others. And while my personality really truly cares about what other people think about me, I want to be friends with everybody. I want to make people happy. I want people to have good experiences in my environment. And then so if they didn't, I couldn't understand that. And I was always the life of the party. I was always high energy. And for some folks, that's a challenge. In addition, I'm super sensitive and I can be emotional. And unfortunately, what had happened in a lot of places in my world, folks made me feel very negative about those qualities in myself because they would use the word too, TOO. And what they would say is, you're too talkative, you're too much, you're too loud, you're too emotional, you're too sensitive. And so as soon as the word too is put in front of something like that, it starts to now become a negative perception of your own self-worth. And so the more these things were being said, the more my self-esteem would go down, the more I would withdraw, and the more I would not engage, or I wouldn't participate, or I wouldn't be my true authentic self to folks. And so I had to get to a place where I learned who could actually celebrate that behavior in my personality in who I am and who is actually just tolerating it. And so we have folks, right, that are, okay, I have to tolerate you because I work
Right.
with you, whatever. But I made it my mission to teach others how to celebrate people for the gifts that they actually bring to the table. Just because you can't understand me doesn't mean I don't also bring value. And just because our value that we're bringing isn't the same value, it doesn't mean we don't both belong in that situation. So that's one of the things that I've really worked on in myself and empowered myself for understanding, but also made it a part of the things that I'm teaching others in public safety, because we've got some challenges with personalities in public safety.
Right. So when we talk about investing in ourselves, in our journey, I would think you're talking about public safety personnel. You would probably want to encourage people to start that investing really early on.
Yeah. Because what happens is I'm working with a lot of agencies in doing kind of leadership assessments, and so we'll do the DISC assessment on the entire team, and then we do a leadership assessment. And what's coming back in that leadership assessment, as folks are able to identify things in their specific leaders, so the supervisors, the admin, there's very specific questions that are asked. But one of the things that keeps coming back is favoritism. So there's three things that are coming back: favoritism, micromanagement, and inconsistency. So I always ask folks, like, if you're going to throw one of those specific words out, you have to back that up, right? You have to tell me, what do you mean by that? And what I'm recognizing is favoritism. Well, with all of them, their perception of what's happening is their reality, right? So if I tell you that I feel like you're showing favoritism towards somebody because you're letting them go to all the training, or you're letting them do this, or they can do no wrong, and then that leader is like, well, I don't do that. That's not what I do. Right. But that's what they
Right.
perceive you to be doing. So whether you're intentionally doing it or you're not meaning to do it, it's still the perception of what others are seeing. So as we talk about the investment piece of it and investing in yourself, one of the things that I learned through this process is, through the DISC process, is my eye style needs recognition. And that means that I need you to tell me that I'm doing a good job. And it's not because I want to be the center of attention, or I want the pomp and circumstance, and I want my need for you to tell me that I'm doing a good job assures me that I'm making you happy. It assures me that I'm on the right track. And if I receive accolades and, a pat on the back and a good job, then I'm going to do even more, because that makes me feel good. And what I notice is a lot of folks don't feel that, because the task-driven people, they can't give that. It's very challenging for them to pat somebody on the back, because in their mind, what they did was a task and they completed the task. So why should I pat you on the back for doing the task that you were supposed to be doing? So the task-driven folks, they don't understand that the people-driven people need to feel safe, right? So, and I am leading somewhere with this, but what happens is if I, Tracy, am not getting a pat on the back, or I'm not feeling very good about myself, and my boss or my leader isn't putting me up on a pedestal and telling me I'm doing a good job, then I'm automatically feeling like I'm not good enough, and I'm a failure. And when I say you have to invest in yourself, a hard lesson for me to learn is not everybody's going to pat you on the back. So you have to go out and you have to go get the things that you want to get, and understand that not everybody is capable of cheering you on. Not everybody is capable of patting you on the back. One of the things that I take a lot of pride in since I started my company was early 2021, I took the NINA ENP exam, the emergency number professional exam. And that was a wicked hard test, especially for somebody with ADHD. The manual is very blah. No offense, but it's just lines of text and technology and things that my brain might not be able to absorb. And so I put a lot of things in place to study for that. Nobody was helping me do that. I made that my mission to invest in myself and to do that. And then once I passed the test, I decided to give back to the profession, and I started a study group. And my intention for starting the ENP study group was to help folks like myself who don't learn the same way have an opportunity to study and to cheer them on. And so I'm going to be your cheerleader. I'm going to hype you up, and I'm going to encourage you to invest in yourself. And one of the biggest things that came from that is I've been hearing some of the feedback from Nina is that there's a lot of frontline telecommunicators that are now taking that exam over the last 2 years that are coming out of my study group that otherwise were not taking it. So I'm seeing that shift in folks being able to invest in themselves.
That is super cool. You were talking about those people who need the pat on the back when you're talking about the eyes, right? Are those the eyes? So those eyes, when they have you when they don't invest in themselves and do like you were doing, like you were saying, you talked about post-traumatic stress. Do you find that the eyes who don't get the accolades and they don't invest, do you find that they just kind of melt, and they fizzle?
Yeah. Yep. One of two things is going to happen in that situation. And the S's too need assurance. So there's a difference. Like the I's, they need more recognition. Like they want others to see that they're doing a good job. The S's, because they're reserved, they don't need others to see they're doing a good job. They just need to know that they're doing a good job. So when I make the clarification in my classes and I explain to folks, like an I style, you want to walk into the room and be like, Tracy, great job on that call. So everybody sees it. And now I'm like, okay, now everybody knows that I am doing well, right? And that they're not going to have a bad opinion of me. The S's, they would be crawling under the desk if you did that. What the S needs is you to walk over quietly and be present with them and let them know, I really appreciate what you've done. You've added a lot of value to this. Thank you for participating. Whatever it is, they want it on a smaller scale. But with either person, with both of them, if they're not getting what they need, then they're going to kind of go in the opposite direction. So one of the things that I find challenging is if I do something that's really good, I'm not going to seek out you like giving me a shout out or a pat on the back. But if you do it for others and you didn't do it for me, then that's going to become painful. It will start to make me feel worthless. And I'm speaking for myself, right? I'm not speaking for every I in general, because that's a piece of ADHD as well. So there's a lot of folks that are I styles in the DISC human behavior model that also have ADHD, which also have something called RSD, which is rejection sensitive dysphoria, that your brain will perceive that you're being rejected, even though you're not. And so it is really important to invest in not only advancing yourself, in your profession, but invest in understanding yourself. So I now can understand that if I'm not getting my needs met, I have to ask myself, is that valid? Like, is it legitimately you're not getting your needs met? Or are you expecting too much from this type of person? So I can now say to myself, if I'm working with a D style or a C style, there is a very high likelihood that I am not going to get my needs met from them. And if I do, it might look different. And so now I can kind of go, oh, okay. But if I'm not before I had this really good understanding of it, is before, it would cause very highly sensitive emotional responses. So I would verbalize that, like, hey, look at me. Like, do you not see me? Like, did you see what I did? Because I want you to see what I did, so I know that I'm doing a good job. Does that make sense? So I know that these parts of who I am and who I had been my entire life really contributed to some of the post-traumatic stress that I had, because whether it was real or not, there was trauma there that my brain processed as trauma. And if I can look back now and go, okay, maybe that wasn't really what was happening, but it's the way that my brain sees it and my brain processes it.
It does.
Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. So, when we're for our viewers who are listening, what can they begin to do if they're recognizing themselves in anything that you're saying? Maybe they don't have all the tools available, like you were talking about. What can they start to do to get themselves on a different path?
Yeah. So it took a while. I would say the biggest change for me was there was an aha moment. Like for me, there was an aha moment where a lot changed, and that was when I was in a second disc class. And one of the things that the coach said, so in the class he was just an instructor that came, but he then became my coach, and this was a little over 4 years ago. And one of the things that he said in the class was, people don't do things to you, they do them for themselves. Sometimes you get in the way. And I don't know what it was about that sentence, but that changed everything for me. And so I started paying attention, and I appreciated what he had to say. I wanted to talk to him more, but one of the hardest things that I ever had to do in my entire existence was to hold the mirror up in front of my face and find the behaviors that I did have the ability to change that could be causing turmoil for me. And one of those things at the time when I held up that mirror was, I was bringing a lot of negativity into the environments in which I was in because I wasn't in a good headspace. So how do I make that change? So the first thing I see is I'm being really negative, and I'm seeking out issues, if you will. I'm seeking out things to be wrong versus going, what is going right? Okay. So I look at this as an injustice versus, wait a minute, is that really an injustice, or is that person just doing them for the person that they are? Or am I really taking a hit right now? And to be able to kind of put that into focus, that changed everything. But I think if somebody wanted to really come out of, if they're struggling in a place where their self-esteem is low, they don't feel confident, they're not being celebrated for who they are. In fact, they're being made to feel bad about who they are. There's a couple of things that need to happen. They have to sit down and ask themselves, am I in the right environment to be conducive to me growing? Because when I was at my 911 center, as much as I wanted to feel like that was going to be the place that I was going to retire, and I had invested so much and there was nothing else that I knew how to do. Like, if you had met me 7 years ago, I was Tracy Eldridge, chief dispatcher of the Rochester, Massachusetts Communication Center, and I was going to be here forever. And once things started to shift, once my leadership team had kind of turned on me and was causing very negative experiences, I kept hanging on to that. I was going to fix it. I was going to make it better. And I started looking for a sign. And I'm like, I need a sign. Do I stay? Do I go? And I had watched a video. It just appeared on my social media by Brendan Burchard. And the video was titled Why Quit? So if you're in this place, go watch the video by Brendan Burchard, Why Quit? And one of the things that he said in there that was like a kick to the throat was, if you're looking for a sign, that's actually the sign. The fact that you're looking for the sign is the sign. And I was like, what? And so that was it. That was kind of the moment where I was like, I am not going to settle for being unhappy in this situation. It is affecting my life. It is affecting my family. It is affecting my health. And something has to change. So fast forward, I make the leap from the center to Rapid SOS. And in that 4 years, I grew as a person. We had a mission to provide location for 911 callers. We did that. I was on the top of the world. But what I also realized is I was on the top of somebody else's world. And a lot of folks will ask me, why did you leave Rapid SOS? Like when they post a position, hundreds of people apply for that position. And I had it. I had the best job there. I was the community engagement manager. I was the rah rah sis boom ba. I got to go to the conferences and connect with people and help product and help this and develop this tech. And it was amazing. So a lot of folks are like, what on earth made you leave? What I realized is, as I was getting to a place where, yes, I was struggling with some stronger, more task-driven personalities, that at Rapid SOS, I really only had one lane, and that was location and data. And in reality, if you think about it, those are tasks, right?
Yeah.
So I was building someone else's legacy on something that really didn't fit who I was. And so there was a moment where I realized that one lane wasn't where I needed to be. I was actually like a drunk driver on a 6-lane highway. Like I needed to be doing leadership. I needed to be teaching wellness. I needed to be teaching liability. I wanted to grow the podcast. I wanted to march to the beat of my own drum. And as an I style with ADHD, the only place that is going to be successful for me is marching to the beat of my own drum. And that's where I had to be. So to go back to the question you asked, which I know it's, this is what I do. I talk and I explain things, is if somebody needs to move from the place that they're at, the very first question they have to ask is, am I in the right place first? Because if I can't learn how to change my mindset to accommodate the environment that I'm in, I might need to change the environment that I'm in to accommodate my mindset.
Very good advice. I was going to ask you about that. Your motto of "Don't settle for unhappy." Do you think sometimes we go in and out of unhappy in our career? That doesn't mean, oh, I'm unhappy in my career, I need to quit. I mean,
yes.
You don't always need to just quit because you're unhappy, right?
Correct. Yep, absolutely. And that is a great question. One of the things that I taught a session at the APCO national conference a couple of years ago, and the title of it was like From ECC to Private. And APCO asked me to teach that class. And I was like, why would you be asking me to teach that class? Don't you want people to stay in the center? Right? Like, it didn't make sense to me. But I approached that class, and that's how I actually started that off, is I'm not here to tell you to leave the center. In fact, I want you to stay. I want you to stay because you bring value and you bring experience and you bring years of understanding in service. But what I don't want you to do is to be negative and be angry and resentful and hateful and hurtful in that environment, because we have to, the only people that can change the environment is each individual person, right? So you have to ask yourself, how much of the negativity am I actually bringing into this environment? Because I work with some centers. I work with big centers, little centers. I work with them all. And I see leadership teams that are really trying to make positive changes. and you still have these holdout folks that are just like, no, nothing's going to change and they suck. And, and then so I try to encourage these leaders to like be more involved, be more engaged, be out on the floor and ask them how they're doing and not be out there for a reason, right? Just get to know your people. And then I'll check in with the people and I'll be like, hey, have they come out on the floor? And yeah, but it's not genuine. Oh, okay. But what does genuine look like? Right. Cause they have to start somewhere. And so when you ask the question, like, is quitting just the option? No, it's not. You have to ask yourself, what is it that I can do to make my environment better? What am I bringing in? So another thing that I have incorporated into my toolbox that I know a lot of folks in public safety are utilizing this tool, and if they're not, they really need to be, is EMDR treatment, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And it's a form of treatment. There's many treatments out there. I advocate for this, and not, full disclosure, I'm not a trained mental health professional, but what I am is a user of that treatment. I have probably done over 100 sessions, and it has taken my negativity and my anxiety and my fear and my panic and my obsessive worry and the racing thoughts, and it has taken it from 100 down to like 15 at best. And so many folks will walk through the door with a chip on their shoulder. So many folks will walk in and blame everybody else for their shortcomings. It's their fault. If admin would just, if this supervisor would, if that coworker could. And my response is, well, if your brain is saying that they're the problem, you have to change, because the only person that can change is you. So one of the 1 hour sessions that I do at some of the conferences, the title of it is very specifically that. If they're the problem, why do I have to change? So you can't see it, but over my shoulder, there's a sign and it says, I'm responsible. And that sign's sitting behind me, right? So right there, I'm responsible. And every time I come around my desk, I see that. And what that reminds me of is I am responsible for how this interaction goes. They're not responsible for it. So I have to make the decision to bring positive thoughts and energy and interactions into the situation, because it's very easy to bring the negative stuff in. What it's not easy to do is bring the positive thoughts in. And so that's it's like a muscle, right? You have to work that muscle. And before you know it, it's like people come to expect you to be positive. And then you're just positive by nature. And now maybe you do stay. But maybe you're walking in, instead of being angry or, mad at the people you're working with, you're walking in having an appreciation that, hey, you know what? Everybody's struggling right now. And maybe they're short because they're not sleeping well. Maybe they're struggling with mental health issues. Maybe they're caring for an ailing parent. Maybe they have an autistic child that's up all night and maybe they're having financial issues. Or, if you can change your mindset on things, then things can't start to change in a positive direction. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay, because we need you.
Well, and you're talking about people-centered leadership, right? I mean, if everybody could say I'm responsible, what a different, not just PSAPs, but every place,
anywhere, everywhere. When I look at where we are as a society, it really makes me sad, because folks are just angry. And, I am just such a positive person. And a lot of times I'm told that I'm fake, or, she's not really like that or whatever. But I will compliment people just randomly. I will thank them. If I walk into a bathroom in the airport and the person that's cleaning the bathroom is there, I will move in front of them, make eye contact, say thank you, tell them I appreciate them. And a lot of folks don't realize that how important that behavior is. because that shows people that they're valued and that they're wanted. And one of the things that keeps coming back in these assessments of the 911 centers that I'm doing is that, one of the questions very specifically is, do you feel valued as an employee? And unfortunately, the percentages of no's are too high. And what I'm learning is that, there is this connection between task-driven people being in leadership positions and unhappiness in their employees. And it is not, it's almost like I want folks to understand that it's not somebody's fault until they understand it and do nothing about it. Does that make sense? It's not your fault until you know that as a task-driven person, that your people skills need some refining, need some softening, right? Because we can get to the same place, and chances are we're going to have better experiences if we are a little bit softer. But now let me go on the flip side of that as well. If I have two D styles that are working together, so the D style is the outgoing task person, that's your very high energy, direct, to the point, fast moving, doesn't love emotional and sentimental. It's just very, tell me what you want me to do. Don't micromanage me. I'll get it done. When do you want it done by? Give me a deadline. Competitive. Sometimes they could be a lot, right? If you have two of those personalities, well, guess what you don't do? You don't coddle, you don't soften, you be direct and to the point. But if you have a D style and an S style, so you have this outgoing, task-driven with a reserved people, that reserved people person, that's your shy, quiet, unassuming. We ask the S style folks 100 times a day, what's wrong? What's wrong? There's nothing wrong with them. It's just their face. They don't outwardly show emotion. They're great listeners. They're comforting. And so you have this high energy, task driven, person that is kind of trampling over the softer, quieter person. That's going to be very uncomfortable for that S style, right? And then, as we look at the different people, so as an I style, I am not organized today, right? So I'll tell you, so I'm very unorganized. I lose things. I forget things. It's super frustrating because the C style, who is a reserved task person, is very organized. They know where all their stuff is. They hit deadlines. They're the one that's doing the draft to the draft for the draft. Me as an I'm coming skidding in sideways at the last minute, and it's going to be amazing, but I have to do it at the last minute because my brain won't allow me to do it in pieces. And so if you take those two personalities, and they're going to drive each other crazy, because the C style is going to say, I want a draft, and the I style is going to be like, yeah, I'm not really like. So let's understand each other and how we're going to proceed forward. So to be that people-driven, understanding person, that requires work on both parts, but it also requires the people-driven people to understand that the task-driven people, they don't want it sugar-coated. So in theory, people-driven leadership is not about necessarily being the people-y aspect. It's understanding what the people, that person needs.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
I'm sitting here thinking about all of us adults who are struggling with this, and all of us adults who have children who have to go to school, and this is the way they're taught, and no wonder. I mean, yeah.
So my daughter, she's 19 now, and she actually got diagnosed with ADHD before me. She was diagnosed in 3rd grade, and while in the back of my mind, did I joke about having ADHD? Like, oh yeah, I'm all over the place, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm going from one thing to another, but I didn't have the official diagnosis, and that's key. Um, I would highly recommend, if you have any question, to go get tested, to go get an official diagnosis, because once I was able to have that diagnosis, it really put a lot into perspective. Now I want to know everything about it and know what is ADHD, what is not ADHD, what is fixable and what is not fixable. What can I put in place to help? What don't I put in to help? So now go back and look at my daughter, who is, 12 years old and has a a school project that's due, and she finds out about it, and she's got 3 weeks to do it. And when am I hearing about it? The night before. I wanted to wring her bloody neck, right? So now I'm frustrated and I'm aggravated with her, and there's no positive experience here, right? It's affecting both of us negatively. Once I really have an understanding and perspective of ADHD, and I understand that our brains will not work in advance unless there is a pressure of a deadline that's imminent, then our body is not producing dopamine, which is what we need to be able to focus and stay on task. So one of the things that I really struggled with my entire life was what is perceived as procrastination, right? So procrastination is when you choose to put it off to the last minute, right? You're making a choice to put it off. With ADHD, you're not making a choice. You actually don't have a choice. So if I was forced to do everything in advance without the pressure of a deadline, then it would not be quality work. It would be mediocre at best. And I've learned this because I write training articles. And those training articles, when I know that they're due on the first of the month. With the first of the month imminent, I could be like, I know about it 6 months in advance. And for 6 months, I'm stressing myself out saying, oh, I got to start working on my article. 4 months. I got to start working on my article. 2 months. Oh, I really need to. And then somebody will say, oh, want to go to the beach? No, I got to work on my article. I'm never working on that article. In fact, even though I know that I'm not going to do the article until 2 days before it's due, I'm still going to be stressing over it. I'm still going to be getting frustrated that I haven't done it. I'm going to start 14 other projects versus doing the article. And then there was this one time that I said, I'm going to do it in advance. I'm going to do 2 hours a week for 6 weeks. And I did it, and I got it done. And I was super proud of myself. And I sent it over to the person that proofreads my articles. And they were like, what is this? And I'm like, I know, right? Like, I got it done early. Isn't that so cool? And then he's like, no, seriously, what is this? It's horrible. And I was like, what? And he's like, you have 4 unfinished thoughts over here. He goes, you've mentioned this twice. I don't even know what you're talking about here. And it was right at that moment that I realized I can't do it in advance. So the change that I made in that environment was, when I have my article due on the first of the month, I block off the 2 days before it. And those are the only 2 days that I will think about, touch, or do anything with that deadline. And it changed everything. So when I talk about investing in yourself, people-driven personalities, understanding who people are, bringing all of that together, it almost has no choice but to make more positive experiences, as far as I'm concerned.
That's great. Wow, Tracy, so much valuable information and such good stories. I have really enjoyed listening to you today. Thank you so much. Any last little tip that you could tell anybody who is saying, "Oh my gosh, that's me, that's me, that's me"?
Yeah. Well, one, I would say, kind of, if you're struggling, I'm always a resource, right? So one of the things that I want folks to do is really understand that they're not alone. And I think a lot of times when we're in these places, we feel like we're the only ones that understand, or but to have a community of folks that truly understand you and celebrate you for who you are, those are the people that you should be surrounding yourself with. And if you don't have that support, I'll be that support for you, and I can help point you in the right direction. But in the meantime, start learning about yourself, because we all have amazing strengths and gifts that we have been given. And one of the other things I learned is that my gifts are often the things that, if they're out of control, folks see as a weakness. So as long as I can keep those gifts in check, then we're going to be doing okay. So find out what your gifts are, and try to find the positive things in them, and build on that. Don't focus on the things that people make you feel weak about.
Great advice. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tracy. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.